Good afternoon. Welcome to the Heritage Foundation and our Lewis Lehrman Auditorium. We, of course, welcome those who join us on all of these occasions on our heritage.org website. I would ask everyone here in-house to make that last courtesy check that cell phones have been turned off. It is always appreciated. And, of course, we will post the program on the Heritage homepage for your future reference. And our internet viewers are always welcome to send questions or comments simply emailing speaker@heritage.org. Hosting our discussion today is Salim Firth. Dr. Firth is our Senior Policy Analyst in Macroeconomics in the Center for Data Analysis. He examines how public policy affects economic growth. His policy research emphasizes the roles of entrepreneurship and incentives in the U.S. economy, while his academic research focuses on the volatility in the developing world. Prior to joining us here at Heritage, he was a visiting assistant professor of economics at Amherst College and a visiting research scholar at Northeastern University. He earned his doctorate in economics with a concentration in macroeconomics and international economics from the University of Rochester, and he holds a master's degree in economics from Rochester and a bachelor's of science in economics and international affairs from Northeastern University. Please join me in welcoming Salim Firth. Salim?
Thanks very much. It's really good to see everybody here today. My colleague James Shirk, who really organized this event and is responsible for bringing this great panel together, apologizes that he couldn't be here today. I'm pleased to have the privilege of joining this panel to discuss unions and membership in unions. Labor unions, I'm quoting from James here. Labor unions are some of the largest political spenders in the United States. The AFL-CIO at national headquarters spent 1/6 of its $166 million budget on politics and lobbying in the 2010 midterm election cycle. That year, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees spent even more, 1/3 of its $200 million budget on those activities. In the last midterm election, unions operated 10 of the 20 largest political action committees. They also made up 3 of the largest 5 outside spending groups, excluding the 2 major political parties. Nationwide, unions report that they spend over $600 million a year on politics and lobbying, and spent approximately $1.3 billion in the 2009-2010 election cycle. That's not including local chapters of unions, which don't have to report their spending. There's a potential, we call this paycheck fairness, paycheck protection, for union members to discipline their unions by forcing the unions to hold a vote on whether spending is used politically or to withhold some of their dues from political purposes. The overwhelming majority of union members would like to see that done. Polls consistently show that union members want their union to get consent before spending dues on political activities. 66% approved and 14% disapproved of the statement that it was unreasonable that unions are allowed to spend their dues on politics without getting member approval. 79% of union members believe that employees should have the right not to participate in their union's political support of specific candidates or parties. We're here today with some people who are actually working on these in very specific cases. And I'm just going to introduce them and really let them take it away. So Victor Jakes, sitting to my left, serves as Executive Director of National Employee Freedom Week, which is a coalition of 68 groups in 40 states dedicated to helping union members learn about the freedoms they have to leave union membership. Victor is also Executive Vice President at the Nevada Policy Research Institute and oversees the execution of NPRI's strategic plan and policy initiatives. Victor holds bachelor's degrees in history and math from Hillsdale College, where he graduated with honors. Prior to joining NPRI, he worked in communications at the Evergreen Freedom Foundation in Washington State. Next, Rebecca Friedrichs has been an elementary school educator for 27 years. Since the first day of her career in 1988, she's been concerned about the policies and politics of the teachers' union she's forced to financially support. She gained insider experience. She attended statewide teachers' union conferences in California, and she knows from that experience that even union representatives have no real voice in union politics and can be bullied into silence if they disagree. Today, Rebecca is the lead plaintiff in a seminal federal lawsuit attempting to restore the First Amendment rights of free speech and free association to the millions of public sector workers in the U.S. Her suit, Friedrichs versus California Teachers Association, filed with 9 other teachers, and the Christian Educators Association International, is suing the National Education Association, the California Teachers Association, and 10 local unions and superintendents. They're currently at the 9th Circuit Court of Appeals, unless something changed since this was written. Rebecca currently teaches 3rd and 4th grades in Orange County, California. Robert Wiersma has taught economics and social sciences in the community college, private high school, and public high school settings in Michigan since 1991. This includes 17 years as a full-time public school teacher. Rob also served as a member of a local public school board of education for 8 years, including 2 years as president. Rob left his union a year ago this month. He wants to help union members make informed decisions about membership, and he's learned a great deal from his own experience, and he's going to share some of that today. Finally, Jennifer Parrish has led a statewide coalition in Minnesota for the last 9 years that fights against forced unionization of home child care providers. She regularly hosts trainings to inform providers about compulsory unionism. Jennifer is also a plaintiff in a federal lawsuit. She is challenging the constitutionality of compulsory unionism of child care providers and other independent business owners. Her legal efforts, in addition to her grassroots and legislative advocacy work, will result in limiting the power of government to intervene in private industry on behalf of special interests. In 2013, the Vernon K. Kriebel Foundation and State Policy Network awarded Jennifer the Unsung Hero Award for her commitment to protecting the principles of freedom and works tirelessly to change state and local policy for the better. Please welcome our panel, and then I'll hand it over to Victor.
Well, thank you so much, Salim, and thank you to the Heritage Foundation for hosting this great event. Imagine talking with a friend and having them tell you, for the last 5 years, I've been a fan of the Dallas Cowboys, but I don't really like the Dallas Cowboys. In fact, I'd much rather be a Washington Redskins fan, but I just can't opt out of being a Dallas Cowboys fan. Now, you look at your friend and you'd think he has a screw loose, because that's not how it works in America. We have the freedom both to join and leave associations, go to a different church, switch political parties, cancel a magazine subscription, even become a Washington Redskins fan. People do these things every day without even a second thought that they wouldn't have the ability to leave an organization they are dissatisfied with. Whether someone is rich or poor, young or old, we understand this intuitively in almost every area of life except for one: labor union membership. Let me give you an example. In 2012, the Nevada Policy Research Institute, where I work, we ran a small information campaign letting teachers in the Las Vegas area know they could leave union membership by submitting written notice between July 1st and July 15th. The reaction was stunning. Teachers called us and said, "I've been a teacher for years, but I never knew I could leave my union until you told me." Others said, I always want to leave, but because the union put the opt-out period right in the middle of my summer vacation, I just forget. The story of one teacher told us is especially noteworthy. This teacher went to new teacher orientation, signed his union card without realizing he was signing up for the union. He just was signing a lot of paperwork and accidentally signed a union card. And because he was a motivated teacher, he decided, well, I'm a member, I might as well get involved. And he actually became a building rep for the union. But it wasn't until we told him that union membership is optional that he was able to leave, and he gladly saved $770 a year by exiting the union. Now, Nevada is a right-to-work state, but even a teacher who was a member of union leadership didn't know they had the ability to leave their union until someone told them. That was stunning to us. So hundreds of teachers that summer wrote letters saying, "We want out," and at the end of the summer, the teacher union membership decreased by over 800 teachers. Well, that got us to thinking that if there is that many teachers in one school district, in one small state, who want to leave their union, but they just don't know that they can or when and how to do so, how many hundreds of thousands or even millions of union members around the country want to do the same thing? And so, working with the Association of American Educators, we created what's called National Employee Freedom Week, which is a week dedicated to letting union members know about these freedoms. Now, this event is a big part of NEFW, as we like to call it, and it runs from August 10th to August 16th. So this week is National Employee Freedom Week. And I'm pleased to say that 81 organizations, we've grown since I gave you that information, 81 organizations in 45 states have come together with the sole purpose of letting union members know that they have the ability to leave their union. Now, in just a little bit, you're going to hear from Rebecca and Robert and Jennifer, and they're going to tell you their stories about leaving their union or fighting forced unionization. But I want to talk just very briefly about the numbers their stories represent. As part of National Employee Freedom Week this year, we decided to conduct a poll, a national poll of union members, asking if you could opt out of your union without any penalty, would you do so? We surveyed 454 union members across the country, and over 28% said, yes, I want to opt out of my union if I could do so without penalty. Now, there's 14.5 million union members, so that's about 4 million people who want to leave. And what's amazing is they already can. If they're in a right-to-work state, they can leave entirely. They don't even need to pay agency fees. And even if they're in a non-right-to-work state, while their options aren't as good, they do have options. They can become an agency fee payer and receive a rebate of their union's political spending. Or they can become a religious objector and redirect their union dues from the union to a charitable organization that they find acceptable. Now, we also wanted to ask the American public what they thought. Should union members have this right? And so in a separate survey of 500 Americans, we asked, should union employees without force or penalty be able to opt out of union membership? 82.9% of Americans said yes. Workers should have that choice. They should be able to make the decision about union membership that's best for them. So we have 4 million Americans who want out of their union, an overwhelming majority of Americans who support their right to make the decision about union membership that's best for them. And now we have National Employee Freedom Week. 81 organizations around the country telling union members when and how to leave and that they can leave. And as you're going to hear, this is information union officials don't want their members to find out about. Thank you. Rebecca?
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me here today. I'd like you to imagine with me a little bit. Imagine that you've finished your college journey and you've entered your dream job, and upon accepting your offer, you're told that you have to join a labor union as a condition of your employment. You'll pay $1,000 a year to an organization that claims to have your best interests in mind. Well, imagine that this union fights for almost everything in which you believe. They badmouth the candidates for which you vote. They spend multiple millions defeating common sense propositions and things that you believe would actually improve your community. And they even send out voter guides that reflect the exact opposite of almost every vote you personally cast, but they claim that you agree with the union's stance on the issues and the candidates. Now imagine that your union is involved heavily in local, state, and national politics. They use your dues money to fund candidates that you oppose to become government officials. Now imagine that these union-friendly government officials sit opposite your union at the bargaining table. They negotiate for the use of taxpayer dollars, but guess who's not invited? The taxpayer. Your union enters collective bargaining on your behalf, but they bargain against the taxpayers for things that are offensive to you personally. They constantly seek higher wages and sweeter, defined benefit pension programs just for you. Every time you win, unfortunately, the taxpayers and the economy lose. Imagine that your state and nation fall deep into debt. Of course, you don't have to imagine that. And unfunded pension liabilities largely because of sweet deals that were negotiated on your behalf. You watch helplessly as your money is used to defeat all that you hold true and right. Now, imagine you question your union on the use of your money. That's fair. And you're bullied, you're shunned, you're treated with disdain. You dare to speak out against what they're doing. You're labeled radical right-winger, and you're spoken of in shameful terms. Imagine that many of your colleagues are so intimidated that they simply sit in fear and they're afraid to speak up. Now, I want you to imagine that you are against all of this, but you have to pay for it out of your own pocket. And you are continually associated with all of these behaviors on television commercials, in newspaper ads, and simply through the title of your job. Your imaginary world is my reality. Welcome to the world of forced unionism. My first experience with teachers' unions was during my year as a student teacher in 1987. Every day I witnessed in horror as the neighboring teacher yelled at and belittled her adorable first graders, 6-year-olds. They were terrified of her. There is no way that they could have learned in that environment, nor should they have had to. When I asked my master teacher what could be done about this unjust and what I thought was a dangerous situation, she told me that because of tenure laws and strong union advocacy, districts had a hard time ridding themselves of abusive and incompetent teachers, so these kids didn't have much hope. That was the day that my master teacher educated me with the other problems within public sector unions. Unfortunately, the union impacted her career and my classroom in ways that were and still are very troubling to me. For 26 years, this will be my 27th year of teaching, so for 26 years, I've been forced to pay dues to a union whose core beliefs and political activities are in direct opposition to my own beliefs, my own morals, and my political leanings. For example, although I am for vouchers and I believe that parents should have the right to choose their children's education, my union dues are used to fight a parent's right to choose. Although I am against tenure, against higher taxes, and ridiculously high pensions for public sector employees, my unions bargain for all of these things and more with my money. Currently in my state, California, we have a $74 billion unfunded pension liability. Yet my union continues to bargain for deals that are harmful to our economy. Because of these issues and more, I opt out of the portion of my dues that the union admits are overtly political. I am called an agency fee payer, but unfortunately, I still pay for highly political collective bargaining against my will. I am not in a right-to-work state. Since the union controls teachers by controlling information, it was quite challenging to discover exactly how to opt out, and even more, how to receive my annual rebate of the political portion of my dues, which you would think would be automatic, but it's not. Early in my career, I received a very tiny rebate, but thankfully, later I discovered California Teachers Empowerment Network, C10. C10 is a nonprofit organization that exists solely to help teachers discover their rights within forced unionism. With C10's advice, I discovered how to opt out and how to receive my full annual rebate of the overtly political dues. You see, when you opt out of union politics, you still have to pay 100% of the collective bargaining dues. That's about 70% of the total dues. In exchange, you lose all rights of membership, and you lose your liability insurance, and you lose the right to vote within collective bargaining, even though you're paying 100%. The loss of liability insurance scares teachers so much that most will not opt out for that reason alone. Fortunately, C10 also taught me how to find liability insurance from an independent source. Today you heard about AAE, American Association of Educators. I chose Christian Educators Association International, CEAI, for my insurance, and thankfully the coverage and service are far superior, and my rebate more than covers the cost. My husband, who is a professor, was an agency fee payer for over 30 years before we discovered C10. Although his union, the California Faculty Association, accepted his fee payer status, they never once mentioned that he also needed to request a rebate of the dues that were used for overt politics. So, for over 30 years, you guessed it, he paid full union dues, funded full union politics against his will. The union was too happy to keep his money, even though he made it clear as a fee payer that he didn't want to support their politics. C10 taught both of us how to request our full rebates, so now we both receive our rebates from our union. Since fee payers have no voice within collective bargaining, even though I'll mention again, we pay 100% of the collective bargaining dues, at one point I decided, well, I'm going to become a full union member so that I can have a voice within my local union. So I joined. I served for 3 years as a union site representative and as a local board member. I continually brought up the fact that many of my colleagues and I were disturbed and offended that our forced dues were being used toward politics and highly political collective bargaining that were against our moral codes and our fiscal sensibilities. On every single occasion, I was either ignored or I received this. Silence and shrugged shoulders. When I attended an annual CTA conference, I asked my questions during seminars, and another brave soul asked the questions during a large gathering in a ballroom. On every occasion, we were answered with hateful tones, rhetoric that made it very clear to everyone in the room that if you did not stand with union politics, you were a bigot. And on every occasion, the entire room fell silent because of the extreme intimidation of the higher union officials. We literally felt like little children being bullied on a playground. Even union representatives are silenced if they don't toe the line of far-left union politics. So those who disagree with the union just step down from leadership most of the time. Well, 10 brave teachers in California and the Christian Educators Association have had enough. Thank God 2 powerful law firms have come alongside of us to plead our case. On August 30th, 2013, we filed a federal lawsuit against CTA, NEA, which is National Education Association, and our 10 local unions. We desire to restore our constitutional First Amendment rights to free speech and free association. We desire to end forced unionism. We also desire to end the practice of allowing the unions to collect our dues through paycheck deductions, because currently, maybe you aren't aware, but you, the taxpayer, are funding dues collection for the union through paycheck deductions. We know this is a huge undertaking, truly a David versus Goliath, but we believe that like David, we have the truth on our side. We are being represented by an incredible group of lawyers who are lovers of liberty. Our council includes the Center for Individual Rights, CIR. CIR is a public interest law firm which specializes in First Amendment litigation, and one of our attorneys, Terry Pell, is with me today if you have any questions for him. We're also being represented by Jones Day, one of the largest firms in the world. We are currently at the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, and our goal is to get to the United States Supreme Court as soon as possible. What we're asking for is very simple. We want teachers to decide for themselves, without fear or coercion, whether or not to join a union. Only the Supreme Court can vindicate our rights to free speech and free association, so we're trying to get there as quickly as possible. Now, I'd like you to imagine with me one more time. Imagine a victory for liberty in the United States Supreme Court. Imagine that all Americans currently forced into unions would be free to make their own choices. They could keep their unions if they liked them. They could leave them if they felt abused. Imagine that unions were no longer permitted to take money from unwilling donors, and that the bullying of teachers and others trapped in unions against their will would stop. Imagine that unions could no longer thwart our political process, so that the individual vote would actually count for something, and the economy could work toward its healing. Imagine that America could return to its former glory in education, and our children could thrive in our schools again. A victory for the teachers in Friedrichs versus California Teachers Association could quite literally change our world for good. Thank you for letting me speak to you today.
Thank you, Rebecca. My dad was briefly a member of the United Auto Workers Union. My mother was a Teamster. I'm from Michigan, one of the bluest states in the Union, or at least it used to be. I was a member of the Michigan Education Association for 16 years, and as was said by Salim, I'm free at last. It's been a month. Well, actually, it's been a year ago this month, and my story is such. In Michigan, one of the bluest states, we've had a bit of a rollback of the power of the unions. The private sector, the UAW and others, have had a rollback just because of market forces. Through competition, overpriced labor and such, things have happened. Michigan was doing very, very well, 60s and the 70s, and then, of course, things happened. Since that time, the Michigan Education Association's power has also receded or been rolled back a little bit. As was mentioned by Rebecca, our union also collected dues and used them for political purposes. But several years ago, our legislature and governor pushed through a law and were able to take the Political Action Committee dues and make them an opt-in. So we are no longer forced to just pay those. That was automatically cut from our association fees and such, and if you wanted to participate, you could. Choice reared its head. And then we had, about 2 years ago, the legislature passed a law that said, you as a union member will no longer have your dues or agency fees collected by your local school district. If you want to be part of that union, that's great, but you will pay it to the union yourself. We will not include or necessitate the business offices of your local schools to take their time to do such. So we either wrote checks or we gave them a credit card number. And like an idiot, I gave them my credit card number. Well, that was in 2012. And then suddenly, one of the biggest surprises, like a lightning stroke, struck December 2012 in Lansing, Michigan. Out of seemingly nowhere, kept under incredible wraps politically, which is amazing if you think about it. The legislature in Michigan came out with a right-to-work legislation, seemingly out of the blue. It was prepared well ahead of time. It had a lot of groundwork, but nobody heard word until suddenly in December it came through, and a lame duck legislature that was denigrated in the media. It stormed through, it made it. I was so happy that day. I thought, finally, I will have choice. According to the Michigan Right to Work law, you can opt out of your union once your current contract is over. So I was in a contract. School year starts fiscally July 1st and ends June 30th. I anticipated on June 30th of 2013 to be my last day in the MEA. So on July 1st, I prepared my letter and mailed it on July 2nd to the Michigan Education Association, my local association, and my local business district office. I figured I was free. Well, lo and behold, about a month and a week later, about a year ago now, I saw in my statement a charge from the MEA for my monthly dues. And I anticipated no charge at all. And I was really curious as to this. Prior to this, let me just establish it once again, in May and June, anticipating this glorious day of freedom, I emailed, I phone called, I sent a letter to the MEA asking exactly what is the process to opt out. Heard nothing. Well, when I saw that charge, I figured, well, maybe, just maybe, all these attempts at communication didn't make it through. You never know. Well, I was curious and very upset, so I told my credit card company to stop payment. I disputed the charge. I looked online as to what was going on, and that's when I discovered this magical, in Michigan, opt-out window that apparently just suddenly appeared somewhere in a bylaw for Michigan Education Association. No one was aware of it before. My local president was not aware of it. When we signed in back in the day as newborn teachers, as was stated earlier, we apparently agreed to that bylaw that no one was aware of. Well, immediately once I knew that, I found the Mackinac Center for Public Policy. They had a wonderful form letter I tailored to my own needs and sent it, this time registered mail with a receipt. I knew they got it. I also canceled my credit card. I did pay the July dues because I just didn't want to put my credit card company through that nightmare. Well, if that's great and wonderful, I'm out. It was about a month and a half later, I received a phone call one evening at my home from some vice president with the MEA. He was all very nice and friendly, asking exactly why would I want to opt out and what caused me to make such a decision. That was the only communication I ever received from the MEA. I mean, it's a nice organization if you're into that kind of thing, I suppose, but I wasn't. So that was my story then. Unfortunately, not too many of us were made aware of that August opt-out window. I stumbled across it accidentally and paid for it. Many others didn't know until afterwards. Again, August. In Michigan, by law, public schools will not start until after Labor Day. That is September. Some public schools will have, professional development days for the week before Labor Day. They have union meetings. It's scheduled in the day. But they don't tell you these things. Well, this last school year, I was the only full-time teacher, to my knowledge, in my district to have opted out. I was a target for some. It wasn't real overt. It was somewhat subvert. I mean, I had a disciplinary hearing. They were looking at every jot and tittle of what I did to make sure it followed the line. I'm not saying this to intimidate other teachers from opting out, but you will face a little bit of resistance. That's how it is. But that's all right, because nothing of value is free. In Michigan right now, the MEA has apparently acceded to some more transparency where they have made a form letter that asks you as a member who wishes to opt out to go down a list and check off or initial that you agree you will no longer accept their wonderful Visa card opportunity. You will no longer accept their wonderful, pre-planned package of coupons with various businesses that have, toadied up. And nowhere on there does it say I opt out. So that's a bit of dispute. There are several teachers that have contacted me in Michigan that said, listen, I want to opt out. How did you do it? Very few. I was made aware, though, that over 8,000 teachers in Michigan this last school year, this last fiscal year, from July 1st to June 30, 2013, 2014, over 8,000 Michigan teachers have decided not to pay their dues. They just opted out by saying, sorry, I'm out. Apparently, they did not give their credit card number. And the question that was brought forth to me later is, this year, if even more teachers opt out, won't that make an impact to the unions or the Education Association, because by law we cannot call them unions? Won't that impact their revenues? I said, I don't care. It could. And if it does, they will, like any other business or service organization, they will either tailor their services to meet the demand of their customers, or they will wither and die. Survival of the fittest, let's not forget, was coined by an economist about business. A service organization, imagine this, a service organization, as the MEA and NEA are, that has members that pay for their services suddenly decide not to pay anymore. Most service organizations would then say, okay, fine, we're not going to provide you with those services anymore. But no, it's more like you're conscripted in the military and you cannot just leave. It's amazing to myself. But some ask then the question, in Michigan anyway, we have a free rider problem, which is a great economics term. I am now denigrated as a free rider. Look at you. You don't pay any fees. You don't pay anything towards the association, yet you benefit from their actions and their negotiations. You, by law, must be protected by the MEA and any disciplinary hearings to a certain degree. To which I respond, I will in no way take advantage of any of these opportunities. I have also become a member of the Association of American Educators, and I found that they provide equivalent protections, arbitration. All these things are made available, and double the liability insurance for about 1/5 of the annual cost. Now, as a teacher of economics, I would be a moron if I didn't take advantage of that. So I did. Now, again, that's a question of choice. I chose to do so. Others may choose to stay in the union. That's fine. It's supposed to be about choice. And if you want to not necessarily invite somebody over to your birthday party because they're not in the union anymore, that is fine too. But again, this is the August opt-out window, and this week being so special, and now that we're trying to get the message out across the country, this should be a question of choice. If you choose to contribute, if you choose to join, that should be your choice. And if you choose not to play in the reindeer games, that should also be a choice. Thank you.
Hi, thanks for having me. My story is a little bit different in the sense that I'm not an employee at all, and nor do I have an employer to bargain and negotiate with. I, 9 years ago, decided to do what a lot of Americans do, and I opened a small business, a small childcare business that I run from my home to this day. As any other small business owner, I set my own rates, I create my own working conditions, I choose which clients I'm going to serve. All the aspects of my business are under my full control. About a year after I opened my business, I had a gentleman walk into my home without knocking, and during the day while I was busy making lunch, so it was the busiest time of day. I don't know, for those of you who have children, imagine dinner time, how the kids are fussy and hungry, and that's just with 2 or 3. So I had 6 there that day that were crying and hungry, and lunch was on the stove, and he walked into my home without knocking and asked me to sign what he said was a petition asking the state for health insurance for child care providers like myself. I had health insurance, and I was a little intimidated with this man in my home, uninvited, so I told him I wasn't interested. And this man was a professional at what he was doing. He would not leave. He, for every answer I gave him as to why I did not want to sign his petition, he had a prepared response. He grew upset with me, more and more upset with me with each time I said no. It was a very intimidating experience. I just about signed just to get him to leave. The way that I finally got him out of my home was I told him that I would sign his petition later if he would just leave it for me to look over when I had time. You know, at this point, he'd been there for quite a few minutes, and I could hear the lunch boiling over on the stove. I needed to get away. So I told him I'd sign if he would leave it, and he was supposed to come back and pick it up later that day. He never came back. I think he assumed once I read the fine print I wouldn't be interested any longer. And he was right. I didn't get an opportunity to read it until the kids went down for a nap that day. But when I did have an opportunity to read it, that was the first time I saw the word union. The entire time that he was in my house, he never mentioned anything about being from a union or working for a union. He had no identification, telling me who he was working for. When he was trying to pitch this petition to me, he dropped the name of our local and state child care associations, so I kind of assumed that he was somewhat affiliated with them. He also said that the child care resource and referral agencies were supportive of his efforts, so I thought maybe he was with them. But never once did he mention the word union or anything to do with unionization. And as I'm reading the fine print of this card, I was so shocked because not only was it signing me up to be a member of the SEIU, but it authorized him to take dues and fees out of child care assistance checks that come to me. So the way that they're trying to pull this scheme with child care providers is that even though we set our own rates and are paid privately, some of our families sometimes qualify for child care assistance. And the child care assistance program works just like any other government welfare program. The family goes in, they fill out the paperwork, they qualify for a certain amount, and then they get to choose how to spend that. So they qualify for food stamps, they can shop at whatever grocery store they like. And that's the same type of scenario with child care. The parent qualifies for the benefit. It says right in state statute, that's the parent's benefit. And they choose which child care program to use that benefit at. One of my families at the time happened to qualify for child care assistance. So this union, if I had signed that card, would have taken dues out of that child care assistance check. And I wouldn't have even known that I had signed up to do that. So after that first initial experience, I thought this has to be illegal. There's no way that this man can walk into my house and lie to me and get me to sign a card and get away with it. And I initially discounted it. I thought, yeah, that's never going to happen. And but then they sent another one, and within a couple months, and that's when I realized, they're really trying to do this. And I started to do some research, and back then in 2000, this was in 2006. If you Googled child care union, there was no information out there other than buried 6 pages back in the search engine, a press release from the SEIU about unionizing child care providers in Illinois, which is the first state that they attempted to pull this scheme with child care providers. I saw that they were successful in another state, and I knew that this was something that was actually a threat to my business. So I found some other child care providers who were also upset about this and fighting back against this at the northern tip of the state, and we got together and formed this coalition. And our initial purpose was just to educate child care providers on what these union organizers were doing at their homes, because they promised a lot of things. They promised free health insurance, they promised a raise, they promised they would ask, what would you like to change about your profession? If you said, these parents are always showing up late, they'd say, we can fix that, And so whatever the hot button issue was, we can fix that. Just sign right here and we'll get that done. And so parents or providers, were signing these cards and not fully understanding what they were. The unions have admitted that it's standard practice that they are only to come during business hours when we've got children there in our charge. So they come when we're busy, they mislead us, they flat out lie to us about what these cards are. They collect these signatures and then they take those cards with them, so you don't get to see after the fact what you signed. They collected these cards over a period of 6 years, and at the time we had a Republican governor who we made aware that this was happening, and he promised that he would not he'd veto any legislation that came his way that would unionize child care providers. But then in 2011, we had a new governor who had promised before he was even elected that if he was elected, he would sign an executive order unionizing child care providers. And he wasted very little time. We at that point in time created a website just so child care providers could get the information. At this point, many other states had fallen victim to this. Child care providers in probably a dozen states at that point, had faced this new breed of unionization. So we knew that it was a real threat. We had a governor who was promising to do it. So he did sign an executive order in November of 2011. And that was subsequently thrown out in state court, kind of on a little bit of a technicality. They challenged the means for which, in which it was done. They said that if the governor can't write law, that would have to go through the legislative process. So they threw out the executive order because executive orders can't be used for that type of purpose. And then at the time, we also had a Republican-controlled House and Senate in Minnesota. And the next election cycle, that was gone. So 2013, just a year ago this past February, our union-friendly legislature and our union-friendly governor introduced legislation that reclassified child care providers as state employees, but for only the purpose of unionization. Mm-hmm. We're not state employee. We don't get a pension. We don't get benefits. Because we set our own rates, the state cannot give us any type of a raise. They, they have absolutely no control over our working conditions. We joke around that, gosh, if they want to come by and give us a break for half an hour and change some diapers, then there would be a tangible benefit there. But there's no tangible benefits that come along with this. What they're trying to argue they can do for us is bargain and negotiate with the state over those child care assistance rates, which is a matter of public policy. That's something that the legislature should do out in the open with testimony and all those things from the public, the taxpayers that have to pay for it. Those rates shouldn't be set behind closed doors as they're being set. After that 2013 law was passed, with the help of the National Right to Work Legal Defense Foundation, we filed a federal lawsuit challenging the scheme on two fronts. First, we challenged that those fees that they were going to try and require us to pay were a violation of the First Amendment, but we even took it a step further and said that just the exclusive representation, taking private citizens and collectivizing them into groups into a bargaining unit, and then allowing a group, an organization, to exclusively represent these private citizens on matters of public policy is in itself a violation of the First Amendment. We had a victory shortly after we filed our lawsuit, and the law was enjoined for close to a year. Unfortunately, because the union hadn't filed for an election yet, and the union hadn't been recognized yet, the Eighth Circuit Court of Appeals dismissed our case on grounds of ripeness. They didn't rule on the merits yet. They just said that we have to wait until the union files for an election before the case is ready to be determined. So we wait. We wait for the union to file their election. A significant victory on June 30th of this year. The same organization and attorney that brought our case also brought a case called Harris versus Quinn, which was argued in front of the United States Supreme Court in January of 2014 here. And on June 30th, they issued a ruling that forcing individuals who are not full-fledged state employees like home care providers and child care providers to pay compulsory union fees is a violation of the First Amendment. So for the first time, many of these providers, these home care and child care providers, for the first time in over a decade in some cases, they have the option to choose whether or not to financially subsidize these unions that are highly political and oftentimes, like you said, working on matters that not only you don't agree with but can be harmful to your profession. For child care providers, the unions support universal preschool, which those are the children that we care for. Those are our clients. So you're taking paying clients out of our programs and putting them in government-run preschools. And we're paying for them to lobby for this, to take clients right out of our own program. So the big issue for us now is getting the word out. National Employee Freedom Week is, it's a great event because, like the others mentioned, people don't realize that they have this right. And unfortunately, not only do the unions not tell you about it, but they're dishonest about it. I can't tell you the number of providers that we've spoken to who have tried to opt out only to have the union tell them, oh, no, that Harris v. Quinn ruling, that doesn't apply to you. You still have to pay your dues. And they won't let them. So it's important to have this opportunity to educate individuals who are facing compulsory unionism, so that they understand what their rights are. They know that they can opt out. They know that they don't have to subsidize that activity. And I think, the home care providers in Michigan, when they had that option, when the state repealed that and they had that option to choose, 80% of them left. So, this is it's a huge financial blow to the unions, as it should be. As you were saying a minute ago, this is about the option to choose and to have choice, and it's about freedom. We should be able to choose with whom we associate. We should be able to choose with whom we don't want to associate. And the argument that allowing people to choose whether or not they're going to pay a union is just so detrimental to unions. The NRA and you know, they're a political powerhouse, and they survive on voluntary dues because they provide a benefit to their members that their members appreciate. And unions can do the same thing. They just need to figure out how to work for their members again, and that's why leaving a union is important. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you so much. We're gonna do some Q&A. We have microphones. If you have a question, please wait until the microphone is brought to you so that viewers who are watching online and on C-SPAN will be able to hear your question. And please identify yourself and any affiliation. I'm going to step up there so I can see everybody, and I'll take the privilege of asking the first question or two. So one of the things that emerges from everybody's story is this sense of there's a monopoly. You only have, it's not like you have this choice of different unions to represent you. You've only got one. Would one result of employee freedom be that you could actually end up with a situation where there's multiple unions offering better services and competing to offer services? Do you see any option for that?
I mean, I think it could happen. A lot of times what the unions will do is they'll push for that exclusive representation. And so, the union is really the biggest barrier because they recognize the benefits to themselves of having the monopoly. But certainly I think if, that provision was taken away, teachers and other professionals would come together and say, this is a group that I want to form. I mean, you see that all throughout society where there are different organizations forming, but that exclusive representation is really the barrier right now. Right.
And some of you mentioned AAE as a group that offers some of the services that the union offers. How would people who want to get involved with AAE, what kind of services are they offering, and how does that interaction work?
Robert, do you want to take that one?
Sure. I'll tell you, as a consumer, I don't want to spend too much time. I just want to buy and go. And if you go to the website, it explains it very clearly, from liability insurance, and they have coupons too with special businesses and much more businesses that I'm going to use. But they provide arbitration services and other things along those lines, and it's very clearly laid out there. There is transparency.
Right.
And if an individual wants to, they simply send in a check or maybe the credit card number.
That's great. Might want to stick with checks in the future. So are questions from the audience? Gentleman there in the back row.
From what you're, my name is Joel Mandelman. From what you're saying, it seems like there's a terrible lack of communication, because until this morning I'd never heard of the American Association of Educators, and I'm sure a lot of teachers haven't either. And based on what happened in Wisconsin, how does Mr. Jakes explain why only 25% of the Nevada teachers thought that having free choice was a good idea, when as soon as right to work was put in place in Wisconsin, I believe 80% of the Wisconsin Education Association members immediately quit?
Well, what happened in Nevada is there's still the paycheck deduction, and right now the union represents about 60% of the teachers throughout the state. So there were a good number of teachers who knew or just had never joined, and what our campaign focused on were those teachers who had joined but really wanted to leave. So the union has fallen steadily over the last couple of years, and they represent about 60% of the teachers right now.
Great. There's a question here in front.
Hi, I'm Penny Starr with CNS News. Can any of you comment on the Department of Education and its role in all of this? Basically, that agency was created by teachers' unions in a way, and so what role does the government play in promoting unions and making it harder for people to have choice?
I don't know if I want to take the government question.
Well, I think what happens a lot of time, and especially at the state level where the collective bargaining laws are made, you look at groups like Wisconsin or Michigan where they stop the union from taking the money out of the paycheck, and that's a great protection, because then taxpayers aren't funding it. So I think when it comes to the issue of unions and leaving unions, I don't know if it's as much the Department of Education as what happens at the state legislature or or even the county level. The counties can offer some control. Really, those states are where the decisions are being made.
Great. Here in the middle.
Hermes Levy from OWS. I wanted to ask to Rebecca, have you thought about informing other teachers in other states to join you in the lawsuit, in your lawsuit?
Informing them, can you repeat the
Asking
last
to
part?
join your lawsuit.
Oh, asking them to join our
Yeah.
lawsuit. There is not an opportunity to join our lawsuit, but is that correct, Terry? But I am very fond of informing teachers about our lawsuit and educating them. As the gentleman behind you mentioned, there is a terrible lack of communication out there. Because of the monopoly of the unions, they actually control teacher email and teacher mailboxes. So if I wanted to say, let my fellow educators know that there are other choices out there, or even about my lawsuit, if I slipped a little flyer in their little mailbox at work, I would be written up for that. And if I sent them an email, same thing, I would be written up for that. So that's why there's such a terrible lack of communication, particularly for teachers, because no one's allowed to get that information to us in an easy form.
And if I could jump in, I should mention that your lawsuit, if it is successful, will have implications for public sector union members in every state. So even though it's just California teachers, if the Supreme Court rules in their favor, that will have repercussions in every state for public sector unions, just like the Harris v. Quinn decision had repercussions for all the home health care providers.
That's great. Question here in the back.
Hi, Pat Span. I would like to mention that my father was a UAW president in upstate New York, and we used to argue about that a lot, but he was a product of the Depression, and I think unions have sort of outlived their time, especially public service unions. And my question is, it seems like, especially in the teaching arena, you have civil service protection, then you layer that union protection on top of that, and it seems like it's a double dig at the taxpayers. And I wonder, do any of you know the history? I don't seem to remember when I was in school a long, long time ago that education unions were so militant. I mean, is there an explanation historical explanation of how this evolved?
Historian?
I can take it. Can I discuss Abood? Would you like to discuss it, Terry, or would you like me to take that? Okay. In 1977, there was a U.S. Supreme Court case called Abood versus the Detroit Board of Education. And in that case, Abood, a teacher like myself, was arguing that it was unconstitutional to have to pay union dues. Well, unfortunately, Abood lost. And so the Supreme Court decided that in order to, quote, prevent freeloaders, and in order to, quote, keep labor peace, the unions were given monopoly leadership, I guess you can call it, over public sector employees. And public and sector employees were given no choice in the matter. It became a condition of employment that you had to fund the union. Here's where people get very confused. I don't have to join the union, but I have to fund the union. So I am not a union member. I'm a union funder, agency fee payer, which I think was very clever on their part because it's really hard for the public to understand. Many people look at me and say, what's your complaint? You can opt out. And they don't understand. I truly cannot opt out of all of the political collective bargaining that's going on out there. So Abood is the reason that that we're all in this situation, and our lawsuit seeks to overturn Abood.
And if I could just speak to that freeloader question, I know it's something Robert mentioned, but it's funny to call someone a freeloader when you've you force them onto the bus, you made them sit there, you're not letting them leave, and then you're saying, oh, and pay your bus fare. You know, these people have no desire to be part of your organization, and in no other place that I can think of in society is another organization able to force someone who's not interested and make them pay for something they aren't interested in. You know, if a magazine company did what a union did, there would be attorney general lawsuits throughout the country because, you know, we can leave organizations that we don't like, except with labor unions.
And as all three of us mentioned, there's bullying involved as well when
Yes.
you dare to try to leave.
Yeah.
So I'll give you the last question. For audience members or viewers today who are public service employees and are thinking about potentially leaving their union, where can they go to get more information and to help them make an informed decision?
Well, you can certainly go to our website, employeefreedomweek.com. That's got some very generic information, but the best source of information would be to go to your local union, ask the procedure for opting out, ask to see a copy of your signed union card. They are supposed to have that on file. That's supposed to have, you know, when these window periods are. So, you know, if you're in a right-to-work state, and even if you're in a non-right-to-work state, there's often these restrictions in the time period of when you can leave. So the most important thing you can do is find out when that time period is, and then let them know, let them know that you want out. So employeefreedomweek.com has some good generic information, but go to your local union. If you ever need legal help, I know that the National Right to Work folks are terrific, so there's a lot of good resources out there for you to leave your union if you run into any resistance.
Can I add a little bit to that?
Please.
I don't mean to disagree with you, but I just have to say this. If you go to your union rep or your union president, most likely they will give you a blank stare because they don't know how to help you opt out. And I even tested this because I already knew how to opt out. And I went to my union rep and I asked her, what do I do? And she told me to check a box. Just check this box. And I said, well, no, wait a minute. That box, look clearly, that box is money that goes to a political action committee. That's a separate donation that we're all making, even though we don't know we're making this separate donation. And that's going to give me back $20 a year. And she said, that's what you do. You check that box. And I said, no, I'm still a full union member, and I'm still paying union politics if I check that box. And she argued this point with me for days. And finally, I asked her to please go ask, the CTA or whoever she went to. And she finally came back and said, oh, you want to be an agency fee payer? And I said, I used that term at least 20 times. Oh, be an agency fee payer. So, and she is a very kind person. She didn't mean to mislead me. She's been misled. She had no idea how to help me opt out. And I have never met a union president, I'm talking local level, local union president, union site rep, I have never met one that knows how to help you opt out. So it's really important to go to the website. For me, if you're from California, go on I think it's c10home.org, the California Teachers Empowerment Network. They're incredible. They know everything, and they'll help you get through this. National Right to Work, unbelievable. AAE, CEAI, all these organizations that we've mentioned today, that's where you need to go for help. Or you need to find a teacher, or if you're a public sector employee, if you're a firefighter, if you're a police officer, whatever you are, find an employee who's already a fee payer. That's who can help you. Or these websites. Don't go to your union rep. You do need to give them letters eventually, which need to be sent certified, receipt return requested, all that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. Please join me in thanking our panel.
Very good.